Hello! The latest addition to Yandere Simulator is a complete story mode featuring 10 rivals to eliminate over the course of 10 weeks. It's called 1980s Mode. The protagonist of 1980s Mode is Ryoba Aishi, who is the mother of Ayano Aishi, also known as Yandere-chan. It's a prequel to the main story of Yandere Simulator, but even though it's a prequel, it still provides a complete experience. It begins with a tutorial. There is a story with a beginning, a middle, and an end. There are 10 rival girls to eliminate in a wide variety of different ways. After you beat the final rival, you watch the story reach its conclusion, and when everything is over, the credits roll. I tried my best to make sure that 1980s Mode provides everything that people wanted and expected back when they first heard about Yandere Simulator. In addition to the rivals, I also added features that people have wanted to see in the game for years, and I even brought back some old characters who were removed from the game a long time ago. In other words, 1980s Mode is my attempt to give you the game you hoped Yandere Simulator was going to be, before I began taking the game in a different direction. The reason why I decided to make a prequel story mode before completing the main story mode is because I don't currently have the assets necessary to implement the 10 main rivals in a way that would meet people's expectations. But I still wanted to create a system for eliminating 10 rivals over 10 weeks, and let people playtest that system and give their feedback on it. Now that you know what 1980s Mode is and why it exists, I'd like to tell you everything about it. There's a lot to discuss, so I'll provide a list of timestamps in the description below in case you'd like to skip directly to the things you're most interested in. With all of that said, let's begin. One of the biggest complaints I've heard about Yandere Simulator is that the main character doesn't fit the description of a yandere girl. Many people feel that a yandere girl is supposed to have a cute side and a scary side, and that the contrast between these two sides is the appeal of the yandere archetype. But Ayano doesn't have a cute side. She is suffering from a mysterious condition that causes her to feel numb at all times, unless she's in the presence of one specific boy. That is why she is obsessed with him and willing to kill for him, which technically makes her a yandere, but because of her condition, she almost never expresses any kind of strong emotions, which prevents her from having the appeal of a typical yandere character. Creating a new story mode with a new protagonist gave me the opportunity to correct this problem, so I tried to make Ryoba more of a traditional yandere. She has the same condition as her daughter, but unlike her daughter, she has a distinct personality and can express emotions. She also hides her true nature behind the facade of a sweet and gentle girl at all times, which is what people expect from a traditional yandere character. I also tried to give Ryoba a more interesting reason for developing an obsession with a specific boy. Her story is simple. She has been having the same dream every night for her entire life, a dream where she meets her soulmate. And one day, she finds the boy from her dreams in real life, which convinces her that her dreams were showing her the future, and that it is her destiny to be with this boy, which is why she is willing to kill any girl that tries to date him. If that concept sounds familiar, it's because it was the original premise of Yandere Simulator back in 2014. In fact, a lot of things from 2014 make a return in 1980s Mode, but I'll discuss those things in detail later. Another thing that I've heard a lot of people complain about is Taro Yamada, the boy that Yandere-chan is obsessed with. Many people feel that he is a bland and boring character. My plan has always been to slowly reveal more information about him over the course of the game, making him a deeper character as the story unfolds. But that doesn't change the fact that he's just not an interesting character at this point in time, and it's difficult to imagine why 10 beautiful girls would fall in love with him. This is another problem that I tried to correct in 1980s mode. The boy that Ryoba is obsessed with is less of a generic anime protagonist and more of a handsome, charismatic young man that you can easily imagine a bunch of girls falling in love with. He also has character flaws that make him likely to accept love confessions from girls he really shouldn't consider dating. And he has a weakness for specific types of girls. Hopefully, all of these traits will give him a lot of personality and make him a character that will spark your interest. One thing that Yandere Simulator has always lacked is a proper tutorial. So 1980s mode starts off with a playable sequence that teaches the player the basics of the game. You can eliminate Ryoba's rivals any way you want, lethally or non-lethally. But it is a canonical fact that Ryoba is a killer. So, to establish this as quickly as possible, I decided that the tutorial should be about the first time that Ryoba ever took a girl's life. And you might recognize the victim. Many players are probably already aware that Yandere-chan can encounter a ghost in one of the girls' bathrooms. This is the ghost of Ryoba's first rival, Sumire Saitozaki, and 1980s mode begins with her death. The tutorial will teach you how to kill someone, conceal their body, clean up their blood, dispose of the evidence, restore your lost sanity, and how to repair your reputation if anybody witnesses your suspicious behavior. Hopefully, this will be enough to get new players comfortable with the game's mechanics, and give them an idea of how to play the game. "1980s mode is my way of proceeding forward with Yandere Simulator's development, without the creation of new animations or new voice acting. This means that all 10 of the rivals in 1980s mode lack voices and rely entirely on pre-existing animations. As a result, there were a lot of limitations to what I could do with these rivals, and limitations to how unique each of them could be. With that said, I still tried my best to make each of the new rivals feel special. I primarily focused on giving each of the girls different behaviors, and circumstances that would make them feel distinct from one another. The first rival is as straightforward and basic as possible. She doesn't have any unique traits or obstacles that make her especially difficult to eliminate. In fact, it's trivially easy to just walk right up to her and stab her to death without consequence. She's basically just an opportunity for the player to get comfortable with the game and test out what they learned in the tutorial. The subsequent rivals spend a lot more of their time surrounded by witnesses, which forces the player to learn about the game's distraction mechanics in order to kill the rivals without being spotted. The early rivals have very simple circumstances, but the later rivals get a bit more complex. For example, the 8th rival is the most popular girl in school, and everyone always wants to talk with her. The 9th rival is a celebrity with a lot of male fans, so tons of boys follow her everywhere she goes. The 10th rival is a junior detective investigating rumors of a serial killer, and she has requested that a bunch of students follow her around with cameras, just in case something bad happens to her. Most of the rivals have at least one unique event that presents the player with an opportunity to kill them, while making their death look like an accident. I'm pretty happy with how these events turned out, and I hope that you're going to enjoy them. With that said, because I didn't have any new animations to work with, I couldn't give every rival a unique set of interactions with Senpai. Instead, every rival shares the same 5 Senpai events, but with completely different dialogue. Some of the rivals have very distinct personalities, and it was really fun to write their dialogue. Senpai treats some of the girls differently than others, which you may find interesting. Even if all of the events share the same template, hopefully you'll still enjoy the dialogue. 1980s mode features a new Befriend Betray side quest, a massive favor that you can do for a girl to earn her trust and make her vulnerable. Because of my limited resources, I had to give each rival the same Befriend Betray side quest. They were all victimized in the same way by the same person, so helping them out will involve the same process. I won't spoil it, but it involves infiltrating an abandoned insane asylum and burning something with fire. I hope you're going to enjoy it. Each rival also has a suitor, a boy who is in love with them. You can identify him because he will periodically walk up to the rival to gaze lovingly at her and then bashfully walk away. In the main story mode, you give advice to suitors using a covert wireless earpiece. But that technology didn't exist in 1989, so the process for matchmaking in 1980s mode is a bit different. You have to give the boy advice before he talks to the girl, and after they interact, you will see the results of the interaction and learn how close they are to entering a relationship. My intention was to make each rival more difficult to eliminate than the previous one. I'll be interested in hearing feedback on these rivals and whether or not the difficulty ramps up evenly or if it's kinda imbalanced at this point in time. I'll look forward to tweaking and improving the rivals based on your input. Obviously, anything that did not exist in the 80s had to be removed from the game in 1980s mode. This led to a significant number of changes to the gameplay. For example, smartphones did not exist in 1989. So if a student wants to call the police in 1980s mode, they have to use a landline phone. The school's landline is located in the faculty room. This means that any student who wants to call the cops on you will have the benefit of being surrounded by teachers while they do so. Info-chan did not exist in 1989, so the player cannot rely on her for assistance in 1980s mode. However, you can use the workbench in the school's workshop room to craft the items that Info-chan would normally provide you with. The room that Info-chan occupies in the main story mode serves a different purpose in 1980s mode. It's the club room of the newspaper club. Joining that club will allow you to publish nasty rumors about your rivals, damaging their reputations. Social media did not exist in 1989, so Ryoba cannot spread gossip online or cyberstalk her rivals. Shopping websites did not exist in 1989, so Ryoba has to do all of her shopping in person in the town. In fact, Ryoba didn't even own a computer in 1989, so you won't find one in her room. However, she did own a video game console, and you can play a little retro minigame on it. In the main game, the pause menu is a smartphone, but in 1980s mode, it's a notepad, and Info-chan's menu has been replaced with a new menu called Ideas. This is where Ryoba has written out a bunch of potential ways to eliminate her rivals. The purpose of this menu is to provide new players with some guidance on how to take down their rivals. You might notice that there are some question marks at the bottom of the menu. There's a reason for this. In 1980s mode, it's possible to encounter a serial killer who is willing to sell you advice that will help you eliminate your rivals. Once you've paid the serial killer to share their knowledge with you, their advice will appear at the bottom of the Ideas menu. However, I won't tell you where to find the serial killer. You'll have to locate them on your own. To help set the mood and make the player feel like they've really gone back in time to the 80s, a tremendous number of aesthetic changes were made to nearly every aspect of the game. The first one you'll notice is the VHS effect that covers the screen in 1980s mode. I think it does an excellent job of creating the right atmosphere for the time period, but if you don't like it, you can disable any aspect of it that you wish. Any prop anywhere in the game that would only exist in modern day has been removed or replaced with a prop that looks appropriate for the 80s. Everything from blowtorches to circular saws to radios. But that's not all. The posters in the hallways, the paintings in the art club, the manga that you can purchase in town, the shopkeepers in the town. All of these things had to be replaced with new artwork, since they wouldn't have remained the same between Ryoba's time period and Ayano's time period. Almost all of the new artwork in 1980s mode was provided by the incredible Mulberry, who did an absolutely outstanding job with every illustration. And to make 1980s mode feel even more like the 80s, nearly all of the music tracks in the game have been recreated in the style of 80s synth music. The overwhelming majority of these tracks, around 90 in total, were provided by the talented Cameron F305, who did an excellent job with every track. He created an album of all the tracks he made for 1980s mode, and you can find a link to it in the description below. Because the students that were attending Akademi in 1989 would obviously be different than the students attending Akademi in the main story mode, I had to create an entirely new cast of characters for 1980s mode. More than 100 in total. And I saw this as an excellent opportunity to bring back some old characters that were removed from the game in the past. For example, I brought back the very first characters that I ever added to the game, the Rainbow Girls and the Rainbow Boys. The delinquent boys with the big pompadour haircuts are also back. So are the Sukeban girls with the long skirts. I even brought back obscure characters like Witness-chan, Study-kun A, and Study-kun B. Actually, many aspects of 1980s mode are references to things from the earliest phases of the game's development. The school uniform for 1980s mode is based on concept art that was created for Yandere-sim in 2014. Ryoba's minimum sanity laugh animation comes from the original 2014 prototype of the game. The music that plays in Ryoba's room is a remix of a track that was made for Yandere-sim in 2015. Also, the nurse in 1980s mode has the same hairstyle and curves as the nurse from an early 2015 build of the game. In many ways, 1980s mode is an attempt to bring back as many old concepts and characters as possible. But with that said, there are a bunch of new characters as well, and that's what I'd like to tell you about next. The guidance counselor in 1980s mode, Mei Kunihito, is the mother of the guidance counselor from the main story mode, Genka Kunihito. The two of them use the same dialogue and the same animations, but there's actually a reason for this in the game's lore. Genka is imitating her mother's mannerisms and speech patterns because she feels inferior to her mother and is trying her hardest to become her mother's equal. This was referenced in a video that I uploaded in 2018. Another new character is an investigative journalist who suspects Ryoba of murder. The headmaster refuses to give him permission to enter the school grounds, so the most he can do is stand outside the school gate and try to get a glimpse of anything that might provide him with a clue. You can't interact with him very much, but he will say a few lines of dialogue if you approach him, and he will say more aggressive dialogue if you get too close. Be warned that if he sees you commit murder, he will take action against you immediately. The next one technically doesn't count as a new character, but he's still worth mentioning. He's the only character who is present at school in both the main story mode and 1980s mode. The headmaster, Kocho Shuyona. In Yandere-chan's time period, he's a grumpy and paranoid old man who will point a taser at you just for getting too close to him. But in 1989, he was still a friendly and trusting young man who won't mind if you want to walk around inside his office. Those are 3 noteworthy characters who you can find at school. But there is someone else who you can only meet outside of school. A character who a lot of people have been anticipating for a very long time. In 2017, I released a video proposing the idea of allowing yandere-chan to work together with a man that had connections to Japan's criminal underworld, a man called the Yakuza. I eventually decided that he would be out of place in yandere-chan's time period, but I thought he would be perfect for Ryoba's time period. And I'm happy to announce, at long last, the Yakuza is finally a fully functional character in Yandere Simulator. You can find him in an alleyway in the town at night. It's possible to pay him for various goods and services, but he doesn't do business with strangers. If you want to use his services, you'll have to follow a few steps first. The process begins at school. One of the delinquent boys is being threatened by a local gang. After you've spoken to him about his problem, you'll have the option of accompanying him when he leaves school, and then beating up the gang members who are troubling him. After you save him, he'll tell you to go see his big brother for a reward. And his brother is none other than the Yakuza himself. To thank you for saving his little brother, the Yakuza will give you a free gift, your choice between a lockpick, a fake ID, illegal narcotics, lethal poison, or an explosive device. After choosing your gift, you can talk to the Yakuza again to persuade him to do more business with you. He offers multiple services. You can purchase illegal goods from him, and you can also pay him to abduct one of your rivals for you. In addition to that, if you have any kidnapped victims inside of your basement, he will pay you for them. He does this because he knows he can make a lot of profit by demanding ransom money from the victims' families. Paying the Yakuza to abduct a rival is extremely expensive, but it's a quick way to instantly eliminate a girl without anyone suspecting your involvement. To balance the price of ordering an abduction, the Yakuza will pay you a huge amount of money in exchange for a kidnapped victim, especially if they come from a rich family. It was extremely satisfying to finally put the Yakuza in the game after planning it for so long, and I really hope you'll get some good use out of him. In 2015, I placed a bunch of cassette tapes around the school. If the player collected these tapes and put them into a tape recorder, they could listen to the story of an investigative journalist who tried to catch a serial killer in 1989. He correctly identified the culprit, and she stood trial for murder. But there wasn't enough evidence to prove that she was a killer, so she was never declared guilty and she was never prosecuted for her crimes. As you can probably guess, the killer was Ryoba Aishi. The ending of 1980s mode depicts the events that were described in those tapes. You may wish to experience the ending for yourself rather than see it spoiled here in this video, so I won't show you any footage of the ending, but I will mention 3 things. First, the dialogue in the ending will change based on the way you played the game. For example, if your rival's corpses were never discovered, they will be described as missing rather than dead. Second, near the end of 1980s mode, you will be graded on your performance. Your grade is determined by a large number of factors, and all of them can be seen by checking the stats screen that is accessed from the calendar screen. Third, there is a very specific set of circumstances that will result in the player receiving a hidden grade called S+, which unlocks something that I call the true ending, an extra cutscene that plays after the credits are finished rolling. I won't reveal the criteria for S+ in this video, but if you pay close attention to Ryoba's monologues, the path should be very obvious. I'll look forward to seeing how people will react to the true ending. You might be curious to know how long it took to create 1980s mode. The answer is that it took exactly 3 months, from June 17th to September 17th. I'll display the timeline here, so you can pause the video if you want to see everything in detail. In short, it took 1 month to make everything that wasn't a rival, 2 weeks to implement the first rival, 2 weeks to build the remaining rivals using the first one as a template, 2 weeks to create all the cutscenes and make a bunch of miscellaneous improvements, and 2 weeks to playtest, fix bugs, and polish anything that looked janky. Creating 1980s mode involved changing absolutely every aspect of the game, from the title screen to the credits. And as you might imagine, making that many changes to a game will inevitably result in some bugs. I tried to make sure that the first release of 1980s mode would be as bug-free as possible. But if you encounter any bugs that I wasn't able to catch, I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive me. As always, I'll be fixing bugs and releasing new builds as frequently as I possibly can, and you can check my blog to learn about the latest issues that have been fixed. "1980s mode is effectively complete, but there are still a handful of changes that I would like to make to this mode in the near future. After you pay the Yakuza to abduct a girl, I would like to show a short cutscene where you see the girl get kidnapped. When you use the Past Time feature to fast forward time, I would like to give you the option of playing a little Game Boy-inspired minigame so that you have something to do while time is passing. Some of the students in 1980s mode are using hair models that have been repurposed from other places in the game. If possible, I'd like to eventually update them with completely new designs. Absolutely any student in 1980s mode might get a completely new appearance in the future. So, if you don't like the way that the students look right now, don't worry. They'll probably get a makeover eventually. The only other thing worth mentioning is that if anyone discovers anything in 1980s mode that doesn't belong in the 80s, I plan to update the game as quickly as possible to remove or replace anything that doesn't fit the time period. In fact, if you are an expert on 1980s Japan, and you would like to share some knowledge that would help me make 1980s mode as authentic as possible, I would absolutely love to hear from you. At the beginning of this video, I said that I created 1980s mode to allow people to playtest the process of eliminating 10 rivals over 10 weeks. And that was true. But I also wanted to use 1980s mode as an opportunity to turn Yandere Simulator into the game that millions of people expected it to be back when they first heard of it. 10 rivals, a complete story, a proper tutorial, a protagonist and a senpai with actual personalities, old characters from the game's past, new characters that people have been anticipating for a long time. I tried my best to fill 1980s mode with everything that Yandere Simulator's fans have ever wanted, and I really hope that you're going to enjoy it. So, now that 1980s mode is finally released, what comes next? Is it time for the crowdfunding campaign? Well, not exactly. First, I plan to watch people play 1980s mode, study what kind of experiences they're having, collect feedback from players, and make adjustments to the game based on what I've learned. If the gameplay still has a lot of room for improvement, then I should definitely take care of that first before deciding anything about the crowdfunding campaign. There are also some other things on my mind as well. For example, I never actually made most of those videos that I teased at the end of 2020. And I never actually announced the winner of the Medibang art contest. I hope that I'll be able to set aside some time to take care of those things in the near future. Well, it's been a long video, but I think I've finally said everything I wanted to say regarding 1980s mode. I really hope you're going to enjoy it, and I hope you will look forward to everything that comes next. Thank you for your patience, and as always, thank you for following the development of Yandere Simulator.